Hey everybody, how's it going? We're here on Drum Talk TV live, if you're watching us live, or on the archive, if you missed it. Great thing about watching us live is you get to chime in and ask some questions as well with the guest. And I'm here with first-time offender, first-time hazing for Anthony Vanacore, or Vanacore, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And I'm in Globe, Arizona, 100 miles east of Phoenix, whereas Anthony is all the way in Beijing because he's with an awesome Chinese progressive metal band called O, and it's spelled O-U. It's pronounced O. They have a new album coming out, which we'll talk about. That's coming out real soon. Their second album, which is Virility, that's coming out. And we're going to show a couple clips of Anthony's playing as a very diverse player. I said progressive metal, but yet you're going to see some really cool jazz. Anthony, welcome for the first time. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Dan, for having me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, I gotta ask, when did you move to Beijing or China, and why? What took you there?
Okay, so I'll try to give the abridged version, but with still enough kind of detail to fill in the gaps a little bit.
Okay.
First time I came to China was in 2009 and 2010, crossing over the new year with an orchestra. The opportunity came out of the blue, and we did a tour of the entire country for 3 or 4 weeks.
Wow.
And we went everywhere. And
that's a lot of land to cover.
Yeah, I mean, China's huge, and we went pretty much everywhere, and it was fascinating. And basically, the following year, the orchestra was invited back to do the same tour, and we did it again. This was from 2010 to 2011, the crossover, the New Year time. And again, it was about 3 or 4 weeks, and it was the same thing. We covered the entire country, and the whole experience blew me away, and I really became very interested in the culture and the language. And at the time, I was just finishing up graduate school in Queens College, which is in New York City. And
my wife is from the Bronx. You guys could probably talk forever. You saw her briefly before we went on. Yeah.
I'm from New York. I was born in Brooklyn, but grew up in North Jersey, around the New York City area my whole life. So at the time, I was in Flushing, Queens, which is where Queens College is, and there's a big Chinese community there. In fact, I think the Chinatown there is probably bigger than what's more famously known in Manhattan.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very big community there. And upon my return, I was kind of, how do you say? I guess I had a different perspective on my environment that I was living in, because I had just come back from a tour in China. You know what I mean? And I really just the energy of it, and the culture and the language and everything, something really just kind of grabbed me. And it just happened out of the blue. It wasn't something I was ever expecting in my lifetime, and I became really fascinated with the language, and I started learning it kind of on my own, more or less. I made a couple friends in Flushing, and sometimes we'd go out to like eat lunch, and I could try to practice my Chinese with them. They were really nice. But at the same time, I was studying pretty intensely on my own for about a year. I was listening to like tapes, all day long, and writing, transcribing. I kind of dove into it pretty hard for about a year. And upon what was it? This was in 2011, I guess. The idea kind of started to, there was the seed started to, of moving to China. What if you did that? You know what I mean? This was like after finishing graduate school and all this stuff, and it's very, you have your life ahead of you, and you don't know quite what you're gonna do. And I kind of took the plunge, and an opportunity came about, and I moved to China in 2012, and I was playing. There's in a city called Hangzhou, which is in the south of China, and it's very close to Shanghai. And I was in a club there playing with a house band, pretty good house band. We were playing pretty much just jazz standards I ended up doing that. It was supposed to originally be 3 months. It ended up being 9 months. Almost every night we played. And
were you the only American or Caucasian?
In that band at that time actually were all foreigners in
Oh,
that.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. There was a Canadian guy. There was well, there was two bands, but actually most of them were Americans.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but yeah, that went on for about a year, and because of visa, you have to have a work visa. Somehow I got a message back from a university there called uh, Normal University. It's like in all the big cities in China, it's called there's like a university system. I
Mhm.
started I started teaching music there actually
Oh, wow.
college because also needed to have a work visa.
Yeah.
So for a while I was kind of teaching music and I was playing at this, place. And then when that gig ended, I ended up going back and forth between Hangzhou and Shanghai for a couple years. And it was great because, in Hangzhou, I for those 2.5, 3 years I was there, aside from when I was with the band people, I wasn't speaking any English. You know what I mean? Because I had a
Mm.
lot of local friends and most of them didn't speak English. So, I really my Chinese kind of got much, much better in that time. And of course, when I was teaching 100% in Chinese. So that helped as well. And
Wow.
I had to do a lot of class preparation for that stuff to, make sure, it was very nerve wracking in the beginning because, it's not your native language and you're teaching college kids and whatnot.
Yeah.
But, I got it together somehow. And, so that really helped, my Chinese speaking ability.
That's
um,
great.
yeah. So that was the beginning. And, this was until about 2015. I met a friend in Shanghai. I was playing a gig and I knew him from New York City. He was also in the CUNY system, which is City University of New York. There's different colleges. I was at Queens College. He was at City Colleges, which was in Manhattan. And
Mhm.
one day, a while back, while we were both there, we actually became friends at a jam session that some of the City College kids would host, and I would play with the house band often, like once a week, and he would go there. But anyway, years later, I bumped into him in Shanghai and was like, "Oh man, you're here too," So we started chatting. He's a great saxophone player, and he was actually in Beijing. He was living in Beijing, and he was just telling me about the scene. So one day I was curious, and I just went up to Beijing and played a gig with him just to check out the scene, and I thought it was really cool. So, eventually, long story short, in 2015, I moved to Beijing, and Beijing has a really cool music scene here. There's a lot of different things going on. I think in the entire country of China, mainland China, I would say Beijing probably has the most diverse music scene. There's bits of everything. You have a lot of pop music, of course, rock, underground, but you also have a lot of really interesting experimental music and creative music and
Wow.
electronic stuff. You have bits of everything. So it's a really fertile musical ground here, environment. So I really dug that. Um, and that's basically it. So I've been busy as hell here. I mean, I play probably 200 concerts a year, you know,
Wow.
on top of I teach. There's a music school here. I teach at twice a week. It's also a college, and recording. I have this band O, which is kind of still in its early stages, but it's starting to pick up a bit. And yeah, I've just been one of those cat. I'm not a big social media cat, but I've just been one of those guys who's just been in the trenches now for
That's
20
great.
some odd years, just working away and doing my thing. So
That's cool. And folks, I'm going to show some short video clips in a moment. But first, I want to ask, when you came to China the first two times with the orchestra, were you playing drum set or orchestral percussion or oboe? What were you doing?
yeah, pretty much percussion, but some of the pieces they did some kind of corny pieces, orchestra. Whenever there's a drum set involved with orchestra, it's kind of a red flag.
Something's
But
up. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So but most of it was percussion. We did pretty standard classical music, Mozart and Haydn, and so
Oh,
I was playing
cool.
timpani and snare drum and crash cymbals. There was also a couple other percussionists. So yeah, actually, because in my undergrad I was actually a classical major, believe it or not.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and that's
Do you
that's
play other instruments?
I would say my my secondary instrument would be piano.
Okay.
You know, just keyboard. You know, that's what I compose on. You
Yeah.
know, I'm kind of, you know, ashamed to say my playing skills right now are pretty in shambles because I haven't been practicing for a few years. But at one point, you know, when I was in graduate school, actually, I probably practiced more piano than I did drums because when you play jazz, you really need to hear harmony and you
Yeah.
know you really need to understand the melody and everything. It's almost more important than the drums. So I
That's
actually
interesting. Let's actually go through a few videos. This first one I'm going to show, and we'll talk about it after I show it, is the one that I mentioned before we went live. And it's you keeping time like a time machine, literally, with a conga player kind of soloing, and you throw in some frills there. Let's watch that, and then let's talk about that. Check this out, folks. I love the patience that is exercised there, not only while you're just keeping the beat, but even when you threw in your solo pieces. You know, a lot of drummers, bless their hearts, right? They tend to sometimes overplay. You know, they get that one little window and they want to dump everything they've ever done into those 4 or 8 measures or whatever. And I love that you're not doing that. It's
Oh,
spread
thanks.
nice and thinly like butter over a nice slice of bread. Very well done, real tasteful.
Thank you, thank you.
What was that situation there? Who was that, and who's the conga player? He's great.
Yeah. So this is with there's a Blue Note here in Beijing. And there's the Blue Note Jazz Orchestra, the big band, which started in 2016. So it's going on, you know, I've been with the Blue Note big band now for I guess about 7 or 8 years now. And we've done many concerts over the years. In fact, before the pandemic, they would often invite special guests. So we had some really nice special guests come in. You know, Mark Turner came one year, amazing saxophone player.
Yeah.
Mossman, who is the head of the Queen's jazz department there, trumpet player, amazing arranger.
Wow.
Jaleel Shaw, yeah, a
That's
lot of
great.
Rudresh, saxophone. Yeah, I mean a lot of special guests. So this was just one of the concerts where actually usually the percussion player wasn't there, but I think the theme of the concert we were doing a lot of kind of more Latin based music. And the yeah, percussionist, his name is Gao Xing, fantastic. He's probably one of the best conga players here in China. He lived in Cuba for a while, actually.
Wow. There's, you know, most people don't associate music from certain cultures to become popular in other cultures.
Right.
And I love that. I love that. Like you can find different kinds of music everywhere. There's a young lady in South Korea who's just an awesome jazz player. And you know, if you don't know, you don't know. And
Yeah. Well, my
that
wife
could
is
be amazing.
Korean, and she's an absolutely brilliant jazz pianist.
Really, wow.
Yeah, we play together often here in China. You know, I'm one of her. I'm employed by her. You know, I'm in her
That's awesome.
quartet.
That's great.
So
Let's see a couple of videos with you with Nick Hampton on saxophone. This is really cool. Let's go with this one first, and we'll talk about it and show another clip. I just love that. Folks, if you weren't tapping your foot or swinging the heel of your foot with your toe down like I was, run to the ER and get your pulse checked. Make sure you're good. Seriously, just love that. Let's show the other one with you and Nick, and then we'll talk about that. I just love that. That would be this one. Here we go. I just love that. So let's talk about that setup. Is this someone you play with regularly?
yeah, actually, that saxophone player is not Nick Hampton. The first
The
clip you
first one
showed.
was okay.
Nick, he's based in New York City. He was just here coming through playing some shows in Beijing. Um,
Great.
but that saxophone player, actually, who I just mentioned when I bumped into my friend in Shanghai who told me about the Beijing scene, that's actually the guy, my
Oh,
good friend Nat Gao. He's a
God.
great alto player, and the guitar player is also a really good friend of mine, Simone Skiru. So this was just like some gig we did at a kind of a jazz bar here in Beijing called Smoke, which happens to be the same name as the famous Smoke bar in New York City, but it's not related.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
but yeah, this was one of his tunes. We with that little trio we have, we kind of do it's bassless, but you know, Simone he'll cover some of the bass kind of frequencies with on the guitar a bit. But it's kind of an experimental group where we play originals and there's kind of some free stuff in it. But that was one of Nat's tunes, and it's a funny song name. It's called Translucent Whale. And
Nice.
yeah, and the very end of it, I think it's an 11 or something. It's just a vamp boom, boom, ga, ba-do-do-do-do-do, right? And then it's just like you just take a drum solo over it. So
That's so
I
cool.
had to get to it for a while because it's in 11. So I made like a MIDI loop of it, and I would just listen to it and just go nuts, while I'm practicing on it. But it's a little tricky actually because it's an 11.
That's awesome. I love that stuff. Let's go back to the band O. And for those of you who missed the beginning, O is it's a Chinese band based in China that Anthony is in, and they have a second album coming out that was co-produced with Anthony himself and Devin Townsend. This album is called Frailty. It comes out on April 26th. Describe the music. I wish I could play those videos, but the copyright police will mute the video. So describe for everybody what the music's like and what was the process of recording and producing like for you.
Yeah, sure. Well, this, like you said, this is the second album. For this album, actually, about a couple years ago, I kind of put myself into poverty, investing in recording equipment. But I did that as a means to obviously have control over recording. And so all the drums on the second album I just recorded myself, but it was done. I invested in some really nice preamps and microphones, and I'm pretty satisfied with how the drum sound came out. And of course I learned a lot in the process. And of course it's nice, if because the drum parts are very hard. So, I had to record things in sections. When I was recording it, I was actually learning it as I was recording it, because I didn't have the luxury of time to learn everything ahead of time. We were kind of on like a timeline. So I just had to get it done. So it actually helped out a lot having everything, under my own control, because I could do it at my own pace. I don't have to worry about being a studio and time constraints.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but for the drum parts themselves, for this project, I write everything in, MIDI first, this kind of music. The music is very designed, it's like the opposite of jazz in many ways,
Yeah.
Jazz is a lot of improvisation and a lot of just, how do you say, just an accumulation of ideas and feelings and knowledge and everything. And you kind of organize it in your subconscious or whatever. And, it comes out the way it comes out.
Yeah.
But this music is a little bit different. I mean, there's definitely influences being so involved with improvised music and kind of more creative music that, it definitely shaped the music of O and some of the concepts behind it. But the drum parts themselves, yeah, I mean, they're very carefully written, and it's a much different approach. So yeah, I write everything. I think a lot of metal bands for prog metal, and I think that's almost common practice now. It's like everything is just, even like, the guitar player of some band, he'll probably write the drum parts and give it to the drummer. It happens all the time now. So, but yeah, I mean, that's how the parts were conceived, but when I write things, because actually I compose almost everything on this album, except for one song, the instrumental track, the guitar player's composition. But when I write, I try to sing a lot before I actually put it into the MIDI. Like, I'm not just sitting there putting random notes. Like I like to, because I think it's going to come out not so expressive that way. So what I like to do is try to make it as organic as possible. So when I'm thinking about orchestrating a drum part, I'll try to sing it in my head along to what I'm hearing with the music. And often that's how the drum parts are created. They come from even the melodies and the harmony. I spend time, I'll be searching for harmony on the keyboard, but melodically and rhythmically, a lot of it just comes from singing.
Wow, that's cool. What was the production process like, and the post-production process, and how was it working with Devin Townsend?
Yeah, it was a really great honor to work with Devin. And he's absolutely brilliant. It's kind of mesmerizing watching him, because I had the great, opportunity to watch him in real time, because once he got everything, they call it like a static mix. Once you got all the tracks organized and kind of leveled, and everything is in a decent place, then it's time to just fine tune everything. And so we met probably close to 10 times at least on Zoom meetings. and yeah, very patient guy, very uh very focused.
Mm.
And I mean, a lot of ideas. He brought a lot of he heard a lot of things in the music that I didn't hear production wise, which, it just took everything to the next level.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and just watching him, because he would be, we would do the Zoom meeting and I would just be watching him. And a lot of times, I really didn't want to get in his way, so I would try to just only say things when, I thought like, oh, bring the guitar up here, whatever, bring, little adjustments here and there. But yeah, it was really amazing to watch him work in real time and produce and mix. It's like, yeah, it was inspiring. And you know I hope one day I could have that ability, because he's one of the rare cats, I think, in that genre of music. But his music is very broad. Actually, it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what genre it is, and that's why I think he worked well with our band here, because
Mhm.
the music is also a little bit, out there.
Yeah.
So, it was kind of a good match, but he learned the process of mixing and producing by he has a very large output. So over the years, he's got it all under control and he can just do it. He can handle it all himself. He doesn't have to rely on other people to realize his vision for music.
Yeah.
Which I think is absolutely amazing. And it's really, I give the guy a lot of credit, because it's an enormous task, because first and foremost he's a musician and composer,
Right.
but then to add like mixing and producing everything, doing it all yourself, it's a
Yeah.
it's a lot of work to get to that level, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's amazing. I hope one day I can, I started dabbling in mixing, but I mean, I'm like light years away from that level.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a whole
And
nother
it's the second album from O. It's called Frailty. It comes out April 26th. And wherever you're seeing this, there's a link to pre-order it in the post. And of course, that'll be active after the album actually comes out. So check it out. Fun, fresh music. I love that prog is still alive. You know, there was a period when it wasn't, especially in America. And
Mm,
I was a self-inflicted victim of that. In the early and mid 80s, I was in a prog band, and in the US it wasn't on the radio, no one was signing prog, and it was either skinny tie new wave or
right,
it was spandex and hair metal, and
right,
we were playing like a mix of Gentle Giant and Frank Zappa.
right,
It's like there was no place for it here in America. So
right,
it's
right.
really neat that you guys are able to do this, and you will continue to thrive because there's a place for it, and not just in America or Beijing for that matter. It's really back. I feel that it's back, which is
Yeah,
cool.
I hope so. We're lucky to be on Inside Out because they have
Yeah.
so many fans, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
So it's yeah, it's cool. It seems like there's a lot of room for, continued growth and progression. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what it's called, progressive. So like I think
Exactly.
music should be moving forward.
Absolutely. Moving forward, growing and broadening their horizons. And like
Right,
Alan White used to say, looking over them.
right.
Um, and like Stephen's chiming in saying that Inside Out does have an amazing roster. They really
Oh,
do.
incredible.
Yeah. Let's rewind a bit. When did you start playing drums? Is it your first instrument or is piano? And why drums? Since it's so easy to lug around and please neighbors, why drums?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I started playing drums when I think I started when I was 12 or 13. About
Okay.
12, I guess. 13. Yeah, around that age. And actually it was completely accidental. I was in middle school. This was in the early 90s or early to mid 90s.
Okay.
And some friends approached me. They're like, "Hey, we want to start a band. You know what I mean? Somehow we think you'd be a good drummer." And like the thought of playing drums never occurred to me. I was like, all right, I don't have a drum set. My parents aren't gonna buy me a drum set, just if I go ask them to buy me a drum set. So I had to figure out a way. So, I did the old fashioned way. I had these like big pots these like kind of tin pots, and
Yeah.
I used actually a stapler as my bass drum pedal. I took the staples out, of course,
Oh, wow.
just so I had something to hit on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we would go down to my friend's basement. You know, I think 3 or 4 of us. They had their guitars and bass, and I had like pencils or something, and I'm just sitting there like just tapping away, beating away on these pots, and my foot is just stamping on the stapler. But I mean, I had the time of my life. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
and I started, at the time I was listening, music, everything I was listening to was, like heavy metal, rock, hard rock, heavy metal. This was like the early to mid 90s. So
Who were some of your influences in the earliest
in
days?
the earlier days, I mean, the biggest probably was Metallica, 80s Metallica
Yeah.
from Ride the Lightning to Injustice for All. The
Oh, yeah.
Master of Puppets and Justice for All, like, were kind of life changers for me. And then I was also really big into Faith No More. They were kind of more like a hard rock band that I really loved. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was mostly metal: Pantera, Sepultura, Metallica, Slayer.
Yeah.
I was kind of into that stuff. Black Sabbath, more like the 70s kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I really love that kind of music then. And so what I would do is I would take those pots and pans and the stapler and I would just on the stereo, I'd put on the cassette tape or, CD if I had the CD, and I would just play along to the songs that I liked, just imagining. And I remember it's just such great memories actually, because it was just reckless abandon. You didn't care about anything. You were just having a great time. And I didn't even have a drum set at the time. So that was how I started. I think I did that for at least a year before
Wow.
my cousin, my cousin was a drummer actually, and we lived pretty close by. But he actually started playing drums before I did. But the thought of drums never really occurred to me. And then I got lucky because he was actually going to change a drum set, and he had like this old, I think it was an old Tama drum set or something, very kind of, it was pretty beat up, but you know my cousin gave me that set of drums. So
Oh, wow.
so I had a first set of drums, and obviously that was like the biggest thing in my life at the time. So then, yeah, about a year later, I got a set of drums, and that was it. I think after about a year of playing drums or playing pots and pans, I mean, I pretty much knew what I wanted to do in life. You know what I mean? It was like, this is all I want to do.
Yeah, that's
And then
awesome. And if you don't mind me asking, were your parents supportive through the journey?
yeah. My parents, I'm lucky. My parents were very cool about it. You know what I mean? They were very supportive, going through middle school and high school. I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for music, I don't know what I'd do. I'd probably be dead. You know what I mean? I don't know what I would have done. You know what I mean? So like, I think music really kind of saved my life. Especially in high school. I mean, I was your typical like, kind of nerd, and just, I wasn't definitely hanging out with like the athletes or whatever. You know what I mean? I
Right.
was more kind of in my own world, and but just having all those outlets. Thankfully, my high school, we had like a pretty decent music program. There was the drum line. I played in the drum line, which was a lot of fun, and we had
Cool.
the jazz band and concert band. I mean, I took part in all of it because I just loved it. I just wanted to be around music and drums all the time.
That's
you know
great.
so yeah, I mean, and here I am, and that's still what I do, and what I love to do. So yeah,
That's great.
it's very fortunate.
That's awesome. Who are some influences that came later? And are there some more contemporary influences other than maybe some more classic ones?
Yeah. Okay. So influences that came later, I guess. Well, in my early years, like I said, I listened to a lot of just kind of heavier music and hard rock and stuff like that. Then from there, I kind of started to branch out. You discover progressive rock and progressive Dream Theater and Rush and all that. And then from there, you start to discover fusion, Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock and Alan Holdsworth,
Yeah.
and all these kind of rock jazz fusion bands, Mahavishnu Orchestra, you know,
Yeah.
all these kind of things. And then from there, you know, a lot of people go that younger. Well, I guess I'm not really young anymore, but
You
post.
are.
But
You are.
a lot of people who kind of, I guess, grew up in the 90s and after
Yeah.
usually kind of go backwards, you know, where it's like, you know, people who maybe grew up in the 70s or 60s or 70s, they might have started from jazz and then kind of started to grow into like progressive and rock and stuff like that. But for me, it was the opposite, you know. But you know, I started from metal and then went to rock and then progressive rock and fusion and then jazz and then from there, like I just realized like, what's the point of like, you know, being so this category? I mean, music is music. I you know, I never stopped disliking music I listened prior because I discovered something new. You know,
Right. Right.
of course, there's going to be bands that you think back you used to listen to and you might listen to now. You're like, what are you thinking? But the bands that you really did love. I mean, some of them I listened to that I haven't listened to maybe in 10 years. I love it just as much, you know, or
Yeah.
maybe even more because having listened to and experienced so many other types of music, it kind of makes you appreciate that music in a deeper level.
Yeah.
You know, so my musical listening never, I don't like to say evolve because I think that kind of
Maybe it just grew.
yeah, it's just expanding, you know, it
Yeah.
just expands.
Yeah.
So yeah, so when you mentioned like later influences, I guess in my lifetime thus far, you know, I guess you would have to say started from, you know, because I started getting really seriously, you know, deep into jazz around the early 2000s. Um, so I guess in my lifetime, I guess that could be kind of considered a little bit more later on.
Yeah,
But
there's a lot of history to go back and dive into at that point.
oh
Decades and
yeah. So I mean,
decades.
you know, I went pretty deep, and I'm still at it. You know, it's a lifelong pursuit. You know, but I mean, I guess my favorite jazz. If I had to pick one jazz drummer was my favorite, I guess I would say Philly Joe Jones. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
yeah, I
Cool.
love his
That's
swing.
funny because mine's Papa Joe Jones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the brush. He's like the brush guy, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, Papa Joe Jones too. I mean, you know, I played a lot of Count Basie stuff with the orchestra here, with the jazz band, the big band here. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I'd say Philly Joe Jones, Max Roach, of
Max
course.
Roach, yeah.
You know, Tony Williams, of course.
Mhm.
He's definitely a more modern guy.
Right.
Um, yeah, so I would say like from the jazz realm, those are probably some of my biggest influences.
That's cool.
Elvin Jones, of course,
Yeah.
Mel Lewis.
Rufus, Speedy Jones. What's with all these Joneses?
Yeah,
Like,
there's a lot of,
seriously, and they're all great.
and they're all great. Yeah, maybe
There's
that's just
Ginger Baker Jones, John Bonham Jones, Neil Peart
really
Jones. Like, what's up with that?
their last. Oh, really? Ginger Baker's
No,
last name?
no,
Oh,
I'm kidding. Hey,
yeah,
there's a guy in a really neat band called No Spoon, and I'm going to put his comment up here. Paul Wood says, us and No Spoon have really been enjoying the O material. I don't know if you've heard of No Spoon, Anthony, but look them up. Paul's a fan, and I think you would like their music as well.
cool. Yeah, I'll check it out. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, remind me where you're located. Go ahead and chime in and tell us. And speaking of location, I was going to ask, are you guys going on tour in the West at all when this album comes out?
Yeah, well, I think realistically, touring will probably start in 2025.
Okay.
Because we're already into April and you know it's going to take a lot of preparation, and also I think for this year things are kind of pretty much already booked,
Yeah.
you know, for the rest of the year. So I think yeah, our hope is 2025 to start playing.
Cool. That'd be awesome. Phoenix, obviously, that's the closest real city near me. I'm 100 miles from there. Phoenix, Vegas, SoCal somewhere is easy for me because we got kids in all those places, and
All right, well,
geographically,
I'll
you know,
keep that in mind when we
yeah,
start booking dates.
yeah, I would love to see you guys live. I want to show one of those videos again. for two reasons. One, for those who joined us late and didn't see them. And the other is so we can talk about gear. Tell us about the gear in the video and any other gear that you have. Let's go with this one. Check this out, folks. You know, it's funny. I've watched that a few times, once earlier in the show and a couple times before. That's the first time I noticed your left hand switching from traditional to match and back and forth. I don't know if anyone else caught that. Before we talk about gear, let's talk about that. Do you have a different dexterity when you play one grip versus the other, depending on what rudiments or fills you're doing? Is it an ergonomics thing or is it a dexterity thing?
Well, to be honest, when I'm playing live, I don't really, I wasn't even aware of it when
Oh, really?
I watched the video, I think back, and I'm sure when I was playing, I wasn't even aware of it. But it was probably a subconscious thing. I mean, there's been a debate now for decades about traditional grip and match grip. For whatever reason, I honestly feel when I'm playing traditional grip, I could just swing harder.
Nice.
Maybe it's a psychological thing, but I feel like the way the tip, the sound you get is different from match, because the way that the amount of the tip that's hitting the drum,
Yeah.
and also the movement. There's something about it. I don't know. It just feels like I could swing harder. But cool. I guess sometimes when I'm playing jazz, I try to just keep it in traditional, even if the stuff is a little bit more intricate or maybe requires more dexterity or speed. I try to keep it true, but it could have been just a subconscious thing where whatever I was doing at the time, just for fluidity or whatever, my hands just automatically went to matched.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know exactly, but I will say there's a really cool rudimental exercise created by a very famous drummer and educator, who taught many of the greats, including Tony Williams. His name is Alan Dawson. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Yeah. He was in Boston. He's a really famous drum set educator. He's one of the early guys.
Yeah, I believe, didn't he pass away last year? I believe.
No, I think Alan passed away quite a while ago.
Oh, has it been that long? There's such a time warp for me with the whole COVID thing.
Yeah. No, I think he passed away quite a while ago, but he wrote something. It's very cool. It's called The Rudimental Ritual, for anybody who's watching, if they want to check it out. And it's like 11 pages of just rudiments, and you play it with like a samba on the feet, doom.
Oh, wow.
And you just and you go through all these rudiments. So, but it has like a groove to it. And a lot of guys coming up, what they do, including myself, is you memorize it. So it's like 11 pages of rudiments. It takes at like a moderate tempo. It takes between 15 and 20 minutes to get through it, but it's great. So, I try to do all that stuff in traditional grip, traditional, because I didn't start playing traditional. So traditional was actually always a little bit of a struggle for me, and even to this day. But yeah, there's something about the feel of it, especially when I'm playing jazz. I mean, who knows? It could be a psychological, because there are cats who play match grip and they swing their asses off. You know what I mean? So, I don't really try to take sides with it. You know what I mean? I think, whatever works for you. But
yeah, I think like it's the same thing if someone's got their pinky sticking out, or the the way the drums are set up. If you weren't looking at it, it wouldn't matter. You just go by what you hear. It doesn't matter what the haircut is or the gear or how they're holding the stick or if they're wearing a cape or a jock strap. It's all about how it sounds, you know.
At the end of the day, exactly. It's the sound and the feel that's coming out that matters, you know, and however you achieve it, you know, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And Paul Wood chimed in again. He says that they're in Charlotte. Duh. I couldn't remember that at the moment. And he also says for you, your playing is immaculate. So there you go.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So the gear, those are 2 ride cymbals, right?
Yeah, actually, I guess, you know, how do you say? I guess I'm a little bit got busted here because I'm a proud Sabian endorser. Actually, I'm lucky. I endorse Sabian, Vader, Remo, and the drums are Dixon drums. Actually,
I thought so by the print on the head. Yeah.
Yeah, this set they made for me a couple years ago, custom made. It's beautiful. Sounds awesome. This is the set that I recorded the second album on.
Oh, great.
This really nice drum set. But most of the jazz venues here in Beijing, you know, you don't really I never bring my drums to them. You know, you just play on whatever's there. But on that video, I was one of my beloved teachers when I was in grad school, who I still keep in touch with. His name is Gene Jackson. He's a Zildjian endorser, but he was Herbie Hancock's drummer in the 90s, 10 years. So he a while back I visited him because he's living with his wife in Tokyo, in Japan. So a while back I actually went there to visit him. And he actually gave me that cymbal. It's a Constantinople. Yeah, it sounds really nice. And you know, so I've been using that on some of the jazz gigs, but aside from that cymbal, all my cymbals are Sabian, you know what I mean?
Cool. Yeah.
So but yeah. So that's one, you know, I guess I got busted here for that.
That's okay. And are you I couldn't tell by the video, or I wasn't watching for it, wood tip or nylon tip?
I pretty much use wood tip. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think nylon tip's cool. In fact, just from a practical, because when you're playing jazz, the tip is so important. You know, as soon as the tip wears out, it's like, even if the rest of the stick is fine, which when you're playing jazz, it usually is, because you're not like beating the hell out of the drums most of the time. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but you know, once the tip goes, it's like, well, then your ride cymbal's gone. So I've actually thought about nylon tip just because you get so much more longevity out of it.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Sometimes the response is different, especially on the cymbal. That's the one thing I noticed between nylon and wood. The response on like the ride cymbal is different. Other than that, I can't feel that much difference, but sometimes I can hear the difference. Not so much on drum heads, but on cymbals sometimes. Yeah. Cool. So let me ask you this as the closing question. This is called the Anthony Vanacore or Vanacore Fun Fact segment. What do you like to do when you're not playing or doing anything that has anything to do with music? What's the peek behind that curtain?
I would say one of two things. I like to cook. And the other thing would be just, I don't know, watching some TV show. There's a lot of great TV shows around.
What do you favor? Any specific genre or series?
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, I'm a huge Sopranos fan.
Oh, cool.
But you know, Boardwalk Empire was pretty cool. You know, there's awesome. There's a lot of great shows. Yeah,
that's cool. And as soon as you said you love to cook, I'm sure our producer Steven, my son, and probably some fans thought, "Oh, here he goes." I love to cook. I cook 6 nights out of the 7 a week, and I actually had a cooking show on TV years and years and years ago. Awesome. It's my therapy. That and growing flowers, of all things. Oh, cool. Yeah, that's what keeps me off the news. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when you finish it, you immediately have a result from it. You know,
that's like, funny. See, I told you, Steve says, yeah, my thought exactly. Laugh out loud. So what do you like to cook? Do you have some favorites and some things that you're real proud of? Each time you make it, it gets better and better?
Yeah, I cook a lot of different things actually. I guess mostly Italian food, kind of growing up in a more Italian uh
Hmm.
tradition, I guess a little bit, Italian American tradition.
Right.
But I I've made, lasagna if I have the time, and that's that happens maybe twice a year at most.
Yeah.
Eggplant parmesan or different kinds of pasta dishes. I Chinese food I can even make pretty good actually now.
Cool. And your wife, you mentioned, is she from Korea?
Yeah, she's Korean. We actually met in graduate school. Sejin, her name is, amazing pianist. She is living with me in Beijing, and yeah, we play a lot here.
That's great. That
Yeah,
must be fun.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So, folks, check out the link that's in the post on whatever channel you're seeing this on. You can pre-order O's second album coming out April 26th. It is Frailty, and it's awesome. I've seen a couple of the videos and heard another one of the songs. It's really, really good, fresh prog metal that is really tasteful. It's not too heady. You don't have to get out your pocket protector with the protractor and the tire gauge and the meat thermometer and the mechanical pencil to figure out what's going on there. It's really, really good stuff. You guys should be proud. And co-produced with Anthony and Devin Townsend. So it's a really nice piece of work. Very good job.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Stay on the line with me after we go. And folks, thanks for following what we do. We truly do appreciate it. And you can sign up for our membership site. Stephen will pop the link into all the channels where this is going on. We got live stream concerts going on. Oliver Wakeman joins us this Saturday for one of those, a concert and a Q&A. And we got some other great folks that have agreed to do it. Just had Nigel Glockler on from Saxon and many other projects. Wow, is that yesterday? Yesterday, the day before I lose track, I think it was yesterday, who also loves to cook. So there you go. Cooking drummers, a whole other show. Thanks, folks. We'll see you soon.